Well, students across the country are coming back to school during the pandemic, forcing school leaders to rapidly adjust their plans for in-person and online learning. Cass County in central Indiana saw a major COVID-19 outbreak in the spring. Now the largest school district in the county reopens this week. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Jeannie Lindsay tells us how Logansport schools have prepared to educate and support families where nearly a third of students don't speak English as their first language.
On the first day back to school at Fairview Elementary School in Logansport, Tammy McMahon's classroom sits empty.
Can I see all of your cute faces this morning?
The only students you'll find in here are on a screen.
This year, I will be servicing third grade remote kids, all via an online platform.
McMahon's role looks a lot different this year. She's an English language or EL interventionist. Usually, she works with kids who don't speak English as their first language.
Last year, I serviced our newcomers, and those are students that were refugees from Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and they would come to a special class for 2 hours a day, and we would do instruction on how to, just the introductions of school.
The district has gotten into a rhythm working with all kinds of non-native English-speaking families over the years, but Cass County had one of the largest outbreaks in Indiana at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it changed everything. The district pushed the start of school back by nearly a week. At first, about a dozen families showed interest in learning online. After registration, nearly 600 kids enrolled in online classes.
24% of our remote learners are English language learners.
That's Curriculum Director Lindsay Haggerty. She says teachers have had to learn how to use online tools themselves and make sure kids still learning English can use them too. That's critical. State data shows schools graduate EL students at a rate more than 10% lower than their native English-speaking peers. With language specialists like McMahon now leading online classes of their own, additional training has been vital.
Perhaps I've even had to pull the English learner teacher, the interventionist teacher, to now become a remote teacher. What does that do? What effect does that have on students and teachers? It absolutely does have an effect.
Haggerty says she wants to minimize any negative effects a lack of support staff could have on students, especially since the term English language learners covers a lot. Kids who don't speak English don't all speak the same language, like Spanish. And while instruction is important, working with families is essential too. First-year junior high counselor Ana Aguirre says many families struggled with the abrupt shift to online learning in the spring. Some didn't have internet or know how to navigate new online tools. But she says preparation over the summer has helped.
I think they know what they're getting into now. Like if they've chosen remote, they know that they'll have to have an internet connection, that they'll have to be able to be on schedule.
And the needs of students go beyond just academics. Aguirre says she's been preparing activities to emotionally support students in school and remotely. One of her main goals this year is to build relationships and trust with families, especially those experiencing a new culture and language, and now a constantly changing school environment.
I think it's really important because I think a lot of things get lost in translation sometimes.
And there's a lot to translate. Just coming to school, kids go directly to their classrooms instead of gathering in common areas. Students have assigned seats at lunch, and hand sanitizer is everywhere. Not to mention, everyone's wearing a face mask.
And I'm going to come around, I'm going to squirt your table.
Even with all the planning and preparation, the first few days of school will focus on getting everyone, especially the kids, on the same page. For EL teacher turned remote instructor McMahon, it means teaching her third graders how to unmute their microphones and turn on their webcams.
Emily, go ahead and leave on your camera. This was the one that looks like the camera. And what could go wrong,
But she says she's ready to take on this new set of challenges with her students, especially if it means coming back to school, whatever that looks like, because she says it just feels right.
And in a time of a pandemic when things don't feel right, it felt good to have something feel right.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Jeannie Lindsay.
School districts are having to evolve because of the pandemic. More than 40% of the state's schools are only operating online right now. This puts more pressure on parents and students. Jessica Calarco is a sociology professor at Indiana University whose expertise includes education, equality, and parent involvement. Thanks for joining us, Jessica.
Thanks for having me.
I have so many questions about how schools are doing online education so that all students are set up for success. Is that an impossible thing to do right now?
I mean, certainly it's a challenge. I mean, parents are worried about the health risks of sending their kids to school, and that's part of why so many schools are closing. But there's huge challenges for families and for educators when schools move online or even partially online. There was a study recently that found that 85,000 students in Indiana alone don't have internet access at home. And so we have to think about sort of what are the challenges for those families to participate in remote learning. And even if families do have internet access, young children, children who are still learning how to read, children with special needs, children who are English language learners may need a higher level of hands-on support from their parents or their family members than their families are actually able to provide at home. And so that creates huge barriers for teachers to be able to teach those students, and certainly huge challenges for those families as well.
Nearly half of Indiana's school kids are categorized as economically disadvantaged. What do we need to understand about how this is impacting their learning experience when they're not in a traditional brick and mortar classroom?
Absolutely. We know from research that when schools are closed, students from more marginalized and vulnerable groups are more likely to fall behind academically, in part because their families are less able to provide them with extra supports and extra instruction and tutors and activities. And so with schools closed and with all of learning now pushed to the home environment, that creates huge challenges, especially for families that may have more complicated home environments, students who are dealing with homelessness, students who don't have technology at home, students whose parents have to work outside the home and may ultimately have to make that decision between, do I leave my child home alone if they're, say, 6 or 7 or 8 years old, or do I go to work and go to work to earn money for the family, or do I stay home and potentially lose the income that we rely on as well?
I've read about some parents forming learning pods. I guess they hire a teacher or a tutor to work with a small group. So, I mean, it seems like a great idea if you can afford it. What do you think about the solution for working parents?
I mean, certainly pods, and that term refers to so many different arrangements, everything from co-ops, essentially, of childcare co-ops that parents are forming, to a hired teacher or hired tutor. And certainly all of those different arrangements have different implications for things like equity in schools. But we can also think about, I think the key thing to reflect on with these pods that families are forming is that when they are exclusive, that families have rules about what they can engage in order to qualify for the pod. If they have to pay money, if they have to have a home environment that can host children for certain days of the week, or if they have to follow certain rules like having no contact with anyone outside of the pod, then so many children are going to be automatically excluded from those kinds of learning environments on the basis of their family income, on the basis of their family's work status, if they have a parent who works outside the home, or if they can't afford grocery delivery, or if they have health risks that prevent them from being able to join those pods as well.
Jessica, we're out of time, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks. It was great to talk with you.